Welcome to the film analysis. Today with Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark by Steven Spielberg. When the first part of Indiana Jones hit the cinemas in 1981, Pandora's box was opened. Although the cult film cannot be blamed for its epigones, this film is by no means innocent of the fact that entertainment cinema is dominated by endless sequels, blockbusters, and has been offering variations of the same for decades. Many a childhood memory clings to Indiana Jones, but if you detach yourself a little from these memories and look only at the film, you will realize Indiana Jones sucks. This is not to say that Steven Spielberg doesn't know what he's doing. He knows it very well, perhaps even too well. Set in 1936, the film centers on Indiana Jones, an adventurer and archaeology professor played by Harrison Ford, who has returned from an adventurous trip. Military intelligence recruits him from university. He is now supposed to search for the Ark of the Covenant, and he must enter a competition with the Nazis with it. The Nazis also want this Ark of the Covenant. It is supposed to make the army invincible. So Indy sets off for Nepal first. The first thing to find is the head of the staff of Ra. Marion Ravenwood may have it. He'll meet her there, a woman capable of drinking men under the table, but at the same time she is a woman who later must be freed from the man. The gender disposition is a bit compound, like everything in this film. A little femme fatale, a little girl next door, a little best friend, whatever. The journey continues, first to Cairo, later to Crete. We get around quite a bit. George Lucas had the idea for Indiana Jones, but was too busy with Star Wars and passed it on to Steven Spielberg for realization, but he stayed true to Star Wars' successful formula. It is one of those typical early blockbuster productions containing an abundance of content. One witnesses a postmodern juxtaposition of already established narrative styles, character constellations and character drawings that are deeply ingrained in the collective memory of the audience. Spielberg mixes genres in this film just as George Lucas does. Here we are dealing primarily with film noir. Harrison Ford's shadow sometimes resembles Humphrey Bogart's shadow from the 1940s. Spielberg enriches the adventure film with B-movie elements and horror elements, for example, when adversaries are impaled in dark caves, like a superhero to hearts beat in Indy's chest, or rather he features a dual existence. One is bourgeois as a professor, the other is anti-bourgeois as an adventurer. Even the modern state, we learn with the Secret Service Pact, is always dependent on the adventurer and thus on the heroic. At the same time, the adventurer embarks on the journey as a representative of us bourgeois spectators. The Western already occurs. We have a shootout in a saloon. Comedy elements are not to be missed. It's a family film lacking sex in consequence. Indy falls asleep just as Marion starts kissing him in bed. Indy is acting on behalf of the Secret Service. He is thus an American James Bond equipped with a leather jacket and a whip. And that's what Spielberg, but also George Lucas, always had in mind, the urge to create an American James Bond. It is also a twisted historical film insofar as Nazis are being hunted here. One could speak of a bricolage. Claude Lévi-Strauss introduced the term into anthropology. Bricolage refers to solving a problem with existing means and tools without inventing new means. What exactly constituted Spielberg's and Lucas's problem? Hollywood was in a deep crisis at the time. The studio system had become increasingly unsuccessful in the 1960s. New Hollywood emerged with highly interesting productions showered with awards, but also attracted viewers to the box office. However, this model also died out at some point. Lucas and Spielberg planned to establish the studio system, but not with new means, new figures, new ways of telling stories, but relying on the existing, seemingly new use of the latest technology, but the way of telling stories was in fact old hat. Aesthetically, a reactionary act, but as we shall see, ideologically too a reactionary act. We need to talk about God in a moment. Blockbuster production functions with a great normalization, a normalization of means of expression and of feelings. New Hollywood thrives on seeing completely different faces, emotions on the screen, whether in Taxi Driver or A Woman Under the Influence. It was about a world of feeling not easily modified. Indiana Jones commodifies emotions. The film contains emotional junk food that big budget and John Williams symphonic composition should ennoble. The acting may summed up as simply pulling faces. The actors anticipate the later emoji culture. A one-dimensionality necessarily leading to resentment. The stereotypical character drawing may still be suitable for cartoonishly portraying the Nazis. You have the diabolical one, you have the foolish Siegfried. The portrayal of other peoples, however, becomes stereotypical. Hollywood takes a colonialist view of the others, as we know from Tarzan films. And this fits into the burgeoning political era, the Ronald and Reagan era and Bush Senior era. It's about rearmament, expansion of intelligence operations, family values are emphasized, and the religious returns to the discourse. Neoconservatism. You build a world out of pop culture. Reagan was a pop culture figure, and a world out of old values. And then you find yourself in front of an actor president who dreams of a spiritual America and who also believed that America's founding fathers met an angel. If we want to be benevolent, we can dismiss some of the others' portrayals as a product of its time, but we cannot overlook the religious core. Technically, Indiana Jones was a state-of-the-art film at the time, no doubt about it, as is already evident in the furious action overture. It throws the audience directly into a chaotic situation. You know this from the James Bond movies. The viewers are disorientated at first, curiosity is aroused, and at the same time we get to know the action hero the best way we can, namely by showing him in action. The action hero does not talk for long but acts. Movement is the necessary condition for film anyway, and in blockbuster cinema this movement cinema accelerates rapidly. At the same time it becomes more redundant. There is this recurring build-up of tension. First, basically, this race Indy against the Nazis. Who is going to get to the Ark of the Covenant first? And then there are these little races, these little moments. Is he still going to make it? Is the door just falling now? Can he still hold on? And it's always close. We still find this dramaturgy in almost every blockbuster today to keep up with the acceleration. As viewers, however, we don't have to adjust to anything new. The fast is compensated with the familiar. It's like giant logos when we walk through city centers. It doesn't matter whether we've been there before or not. It doesn't matter at all. We know the shops, we know the logos, we know the people who come towards us wearing the corresponding shirts. And this is then also very clearly shown by the fact that such sketches are integrated into the blockbuster, also scenes that we have seen 1,000 times before. A woman jumps into a man's arms and then immediately shouts, "You bastard, get your hands off me!" These are almost blockbuster rituals. Also corresponding symbols like the key that must be searched for and other objects. This is only loosened up with little surprises when Indy doesn't reach for the whip but prefers to take the pistol. And during all this, the jokes make the brutality a little more digestible, because this film is certainly brutal. Indy also has an antipode, Belloc. He is a Frenchman, he is not an action hero, he acts like a French colonial master, mainly by giving orders. He doesn't get dirty himself. His hands are there to adjust his hat, to smoke. The film thus contrasts the old Europe and the new approach of the Americans. This is particularly clear in the encounter in the bar when Belloc and Indy sit close to each other. Admittedly, the scene also shows closeness. They both work on assignment. They are both adventurers, but with Belloc, it's not so much about the truth, the search for the religious. He doesn't take it all so seriously. He says that if you bury this old clock and dig it up again 10,000 years later, it's worth more. But for him, it's a very mundane thing. As he also states, the Ark of the Covenant is a radio to talk to God. Hitler, they say in the film, is obsessed with the occult. That's why he wants this Ark of the Covenant. But the film is also obsessed with the occult. Spielberg is repeatedly afflicted by the religious and the magical other throughout his work. Consider, for example, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, involving aliens. When they arrive on Earth, a deep bass is heard. We hear such a bass again when the Ark of the Covenant is unveiled, when God virtually appears. But now it is no longer the other, the extraterrestrial, but religiously turned. We are dealing with God. The Ark of the Covenant is unveiled, the lamps standing there burn out, the quasi-artificiality of the film set goes out, now God himself is shining. Of course, one can also see the Ark of the Covenant as a miracle weapon, as a metaphor for the atomic bomb with which one can defeat the Nazis, but that would be too short-sighted. It is certainly a wonder weapon too, but this is about the presence of God, the intervention of God, unusual for an action film. Man, Indy, surpassing himself, immediately virtuous with the whip, is now set back. He is degraded to a spectator like us. We know God appearing on a stage, deus ex machina, from ancient theatre or Baroque theatre. The appearance of God here refers to producing the stage machine. The technology for bringing forth the transcendent now returns in the technical blockbuster. One skips over modernity, goes back to Baroque or ancient Hollywood, knows the substitute of the deus ex machina. Again and again, the unforeseen happens. A figure arrives suddenly and fires the decisive shot. present everywhere in the Western, but Indiana Jones is about more. Here, God himself must be present. We experience something known from the Bible film, namely from the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston. The Ten Commandments are kept in the Ark of the Covenant, where God also appears symbolically. In Indiana Jones, however, God himself appears. It's not like in the Westerns or other films where suddenly the unexpected just happens, but God is there. However, there are two problems with this. God defeats the Nazis here, but we know that historically the Holocaust follows. And where was God then? Theodicy is a very big question, not only concerning theologians. Where was God? Was he not in Auschwitz? Why did he allow the suffering? That is the big question. That's why it's very strange to place God here who just defeats the Nazis. Secondly, with God, we are also undermining the basis of the modern state. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas strive for mythologization. Blockbuster cinema offers a substitute in times of secularization, meaning Indy is a scientist and should only want to examine the Ark of the Covenant, but he is not allowed to examine it. In the end, the state confiscates the Ark of the Covenant and puts it in a box. This box is shoved into a huge warehouse. It's almost like a Kafka novel. The Ark of the Covenant is stored in this wooden box. It's numbered, so you will probably find it again, but when you look at it from the outside, when you see all these boxes, you don't know where it is. If this box is in this state storage, it is still in the possession of the state. You don't go so far as to want to use the Ark of the Covenant to govern. That is what Hitler is trying to do. One is a democratic state. Claude Lefort would say in democracy there is the empty middle, absent of king or divine power. Let's consider Harry Potter. He throws away the Elder Wand. He doesn't want to be the regent, but the people are sovereign. Spielberg re-enchants the world. He connects the sacred closely with the secrets of the state, with the Secret Service. Spielberg's cinema is the counterworld to the modern bureaucracy described by Max Weber. We do see the administration here. The Ark of the Covenant is shoved somewhere, but the state is in possession of the Ark of the Covenant, but is thus also the bearer of divine truth and keeps it under lock and key. How is this end to be interpreted? In Star Wars we know that one is in search of the Force, that one should believe in the Force. The Force exists, as the sequels show. What about a modern state? Is it even compatible that there is such a divine power? No, says the constitutional lawyer Horst Dreyer in his book State Without God, Religion in Secular Modernity. He states, the liberal constitutional state rests on rational foundations, above all the idea of a social or sovereign contract made it clear that the state was a rational product of human beings because it only emerged from the decision of will determined by reason, insight and expediency from the individual's own disposition. End of quote. And on this matter, the great philosophers of the state were in agreement. Dreyer writes further, in view of this strong imprint of rationality and reasonable structuring of the political community, it must be irritating when in recent times, not only in general or political philosophy, but also in German constitutional law, teachers increasingly encounter ways of speaking and figures of thought that run strictly counter to this. One locates the central anchoring of the political community not in dimensions of enlightened reason, but in dark, deep layers of myth. Not in rational argumentation, but in notions of the numinous or even sacred sacrifice, not in the secular distance of a neutral state that excludes the religious question of truth, but in its ostensibly deep saturation with elements of sacrality." End of quote. That's what blockbuster cinema had already initiated long ago in the 1980s. It gave the state a mythical basis again, something sacred. And that is precisely what Steven Spielberg is interested in here. Hence, he introduces God as such an important factor in politics. After all, one could easily see the Nazis as the enemy, even characterize them as morally evil, but you don't need God as a legitimization or as a secret weapon. There is no need for a mythical basis for American democracy, nor in the fight against the Nazis. After all, the Nazis are committing injustice that can be rationally justified and thus also rationally fought. Spielberg rejects rationality and thus also the Enlightenment. Not only does he bring God back into the cinema, but the USA also becomes God's own country again. A secular state does not imply a secular society. This distinction matters. The secular state is precisely the condition for something like religious freedom. If the state keeps out of the religious and does not say, we are bearers of truth, we have God here somewhere in the archive, in the box, but God, that is the discourse taking place in society. But that is not our state business. Only then can we guarantee religious freedom. Indiana Jones rewinds it, however. Dreyer says, "This secular state of modernity needs no sacred aura and no myth." And he makes it clear once again, myths lead to argumentatively unquestionable evidence. This is precisely what is profoundly alien to an enlightened society. Dreyer also makes it clear that this sacral mode of argumentation can produce strong effects, that you can of course use it to emotionalize people in a positive sense, but the lynch mob also works with such emotionalization. That's why the pre-cut emotions produced by blockbuster cinema and gratefully taken up by politics, let's think of Reagan or Trump, are precisely why this emotionalization is so difficult, so problematic. In this profanity in the secular state, in the renunciation of God, lies a great risk. It's not easy, as Ernst Wolfgang Böckenförde would say. However, Spielberg does not want to take this risk. Instead, he brings God back into politics and the state so that the latest technology in the blockbuster brings about anti-modernity, and we only watch but do not see. It would be nice if you would like to support the film analysis financially. You can do so via my bank account or PayPal. Also, you can find me on Patreon. Thank you very much.